This is Crappy to Happy, and I am your host, Cass Dunn. I'm a clinical and coaching psychologist, a mindfulness meditation teacher, and of course, author of the Crappy to Happy books. In this show, I bring you conversations with interesting, inspiring, intelligent people who are experts in their field and who have something of value to share that will help you feel less crappy and more happy. Welcome back to Crappy to Happy. Today, I am very excited to introduce you to Megan Dalla-Camina. Megan is a globally recognized expert in women's leadership, empowerment, and feminine wisdom. She spent almost 2 decades in senior executive roles in some of the world's biggest male-dominated industries, places like PwC, GE, IBM, before she experienced a major burnout, which completely reshaped the trajectory of her career. Today, Megan is the founder of Women Rising, which is an award-winning global program supporting many thousands of women in over 70 countries. She's also the author of multiple best-selling books, including Women Rising, which we will discuss today. And she's currently completing a PhD in philosophy and religion with a focus on women's spirituality and leadership. In this conversation, Megan and I dive straight into the realities of the modern workplace for women and why only 8% of women report thriving in the workplace, the systemic biases that women face, and how that external patriarchy actually becomes our inner narrative, our inner critic. Megan breaks down her 6 paradoxes of power, which is so interesting to me, and how these paradoxes of power shape women's behavior. Things like the confidence paradox, the motherhood paradox, and why so many high-achieving women blame themselves for problems which are actually baked into the system. Megan also introduces her 13 inner critic archetypes, everything from the perfectionist to the overachiever to the ideal mother. I can already hear you ticking them off the list. And she explains how understanding your dominant archetype can help you break free from lifelong patterns of people-pleasing, overworking, and self-doubt. Obviously, with the work that I do, I found so much of interest in my conversation with Megan. Our work aligns in many ways. And we also discuss in this conversation Megan's passion for women's spirituality and for feminine wisdom, why reconnecting with your feminine wisdom and your spirituality is not woo, it's not soft or weak, it's actually a radical form of power that helps women reclaim agency in their work, their leadership, and their lives. This is such a rich, expansive, and grounded conversation. I think that you are going to get so much out of it. I know I did. Here is my conversation with Megan Dalla-Camina. Megan, welcome to the Crappy to Happy podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Megan, I'm very interested in the work that you do. And I do similar work myself with women, particularly around self-doubt and imposter syndrome. So I was really excited to talk to you and find out more about the work that you do. Before we jump into that, would you mind just giving us the nutshell version of your career history and what brought you to doing the work that you do now?
Sure, happy to. So I've been working, a very long time. I spent 18 years in corporate. So that was, a big chunk of my career. I started in corporate when I was 25 and I left when I was 42. So really formative years. And I worked in corporate America, big American male-dominated companies, GE, PwC, IBM, in executive roles. So my last job was head of strategy at IBM, $5 billion business division of IBM. So that was my corporate career. During my corporate career, I did all the things. I was the young up and coming single executive, then got married, then had a baby, then got divorced, then had a major burnout, and then completely reshaped, the last 7 years in corporate, how I worked. Got really involved in gender diversity and women's leadership work, really involved in positive psychology and neuroscience and positive leadership. And that then did a couple of master's degrees.
As you do.
As you do. And then that all led me to really uncovering this purpose and passion, which is my life's work around women, helping women rise. So I left corporate 13 years ago, I can't believe it, to start my own business. And so now, I'm fully dedicated to women's empowerment, women's leadership, women's spirituality, women really creating the lives and careers and inner journeys that they want, on their terms, with wholeness, not this fragmented patriarchal view of what our womanhood should look like. So that's what I do. And I, run one of my companies is Women Rising.
Mm-hmm.
And we run a really incredible virtual women's development journey that we run twice a year, live across 68 countries. I write books.
Wow.
I'm doing my PhD in women's spirituality. And I'm a single mum to a 24-year-old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was it your experience of like working in that very male-dominated industry and experiencing gender bias in the workplace that kind of led you or inspired you to go down this path? Like, what was your personal experience of that?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I grew up around boys. And the reason that's important is I didn't know that there was a problem for a very long time. Like until I was well into my 30s, I didn't realize that we had a gender problem. I grew up around boys. I sang in a band when I was in high school with boys. My friends were all boys. In my school, my whole high school, there were 22 boys and 5 girls for all 5 years of senior school. And then I went into work and it was men everywhere and, a smattering of women. I just thought that was just the way that it was until I hit IBM. And IBM was very big on gender diversity. It was really part of their DNA. That's when I really first got my taste of, right, this can actually look different.
Right.
And all of the experiences that I had, being a really young executive at IBM, being one of only a few women on the executive team, being the youngest. I was always the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
Not anymore, but I always was. And then just literally working myself into the ground because, again, I thought that's just what you did. That's what I saw around me. That's how all the men worked. So I thought, well, this is just how you do it. You show up, you put your armor on, you put your game face on, you get to work. And then after I had my burnout when I was 36, when my son was 6 in kindergarten, that's when I really started to piece a few bits and pieces together. You can't work like this and expect to have anything other than burnout because we're not meant to work 16 hours a day for a decade with no breaks and raise children and do all of those things and try and study and craziness, right? Like I look back now and I'm just like nuts. And it's when I also started to look around and really realize and understand and ask, like, where are the women? Where are the women? And where are the women doing it the way that I want to do it, not like this? Like there has to be a better way than this. So that's 2 decades ago now, but that's really when I sort of what I call, when I woke up to the realities of the world around me. And that's been the path of discovery ever since.
It is interesting, isn't it, that you say, I didn't even realize there was a problem, as in it's so ingrained. It's just what you're conditioned to believe is the way and the only way.
Yes. And that's patriarchy, right?
Right.
Like that is the very definition of patriarchy, a world and systems built by men for men to succeed in. And women, we're just lucky if we get to come along for the ride. And remembering this is 20 years ago, like we certainly weren't having the conversations that we were even having a decade later back then.
Yeah.
Women were just expected to show up, fit in and get along. And don't complain. Don't show that you're a mother. Don't show any sign of weakness. Don't show that you can't do it. Or guess what? You're going to lose your seat at the table. This is why we conditioned ourselves as women to just do it. Do it all. Don't complain about it.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of women, even to this day, because I coach thousands of women every year in our program, even to this day, that is still so much part of the mentality.
Yeah.
And, in the Women Rising book, the whole first section of that book is around patriarchy and what I call the paradoxes of power. And women read that today, 2025, and they're like, I had no idea. I had no idea there's this leadership paradox where we tell women we want you to lead, but don't lead like that. Like lead how we want you to lead and how it's always been done. The motherhood paradox where you are expected to work like you don't have children, and mother like you don't have a job outside the home. And women are still shocked by these things. Like we're not as progressed as we think that we are.
Interesting that you mentioned the 6 paradoxes of power, because I was going to ask you if you could run through those. So that was 2, the leadership paradox, the motherhood paradox. What are the other paradoxes?
Yeah, so there's
power?
the confidence paradox. Be confident, but don't be too confident.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're too confident, we're going to put you back in your box. The visibility paradox, be visible, but again, like don't overshine, because that's not how women are conditioned. That's not the gender normative behavior that we expect. The success paradox, be successful, but in a sea of expectations. So you can have your success goals as long as they fit in to what society expects women's success to look like. And then the first one, the empowerment paradox, be empowered, but in a system that disempowers you, a system that's set up to actually be disempowering for women, with all of the barriers and all of the gates and all of the expectations that we place. So they're the 6. And like it took me a lot of research and a lot of time to really distill what actually happens in patriarchal societies. What happens in our workplaces? What are these expectations still today that are placed on women? And then how do I sort of like narrow them down and put them in a way, articulate them in a way that we just go, yeah, now that I see it, I can't unsee it. Whether I'm a woman, I'm a man, I'm non-binary, whatever, like once you see these things and you articulate them, it's quite staggering, the realizations that we then have from that about the world that we live in, but also about us, ourselves, and how we show up and what our choices are.
On that, so what are some of these paradoxes of womanhood that cause women to self-sabotage?
The way that I sort of look at it and articulate it is, we have the external patriarchy, and we live and operate within all of those paradoxes of power that I've spoken about. All of society's gender norms, the normative behavior that we expect of women, all of this is projected onto us. We see it everywhere, even if we don't see it, even if it's in our subconscious. Mm-hmm. And then as women, we take that patriarchy and we internalize it. So we have the external patriarchy and we have the internalized patriarchy, which we so often I missed that for like the first 40 years of my life, right? I was like, what do you mean I have an internalized patriarchy? Of course we do. Like it's so obvious when you think about it. And that internalized patriarchy becomes our inner critic.
Right.
That inner narrative in our minds that so often doesn't have our best interests at heart and is feeding to us all of the stories that the patriarchy has been telling women for generations. You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not thin enough. You don't fit in here. You don't belong. They don't like you. So put yourself back in the box. And that shapes so much of our experience as women. And we don't even realize that it's happening.
It's so ingrained and it's so unconscious, but it's running our lives.
Running our lives. Yeah. Running all of our decisions, all of our choices, how we show up. We wonder why we don't speak up in a meeting. We wonder why we don't go for the job. We wonder why we don't leave the relationship. It's because of the narrative that's going on and the stories that we're telling and the beliefs that we're choosing and the reality that we're making from all of that we're unconscious to.
So in your book, Women Rising, you have identified the 13 archetypes of the inner critic. I've got a bit of a 2-pronged question around that. First of all, I think it's really interesting, this concept of archetypes. And I know you mentioned you're studying spirituality, which I love, and I could have a whole conversation about that. So could you just kind of explain what the concept of archetype first and foremost, like what does that actually mean and how is that useful? And then maybe, run through what some of those archetypes of the inner critic are, because I know that listeners will be wanting to go tick, tick, tick.
Yes. And we can give everyone a quiz to go and do so they can actually look at their archetypes. So archetypes really come from Jungian psychology, right? And these are like the common roles that we see. The common personality types would be another way of looking at it that we see generally in society. So when I look at inner critic archetypes, and again, it took me a long time to come up with these because I wanted to go deeper. I've been teaching inner critic work for 15 years, but I wanted to go under the general strategies and look at, well, depending on what my archetype is, which are these common personality types or characters. Characters is another great word for archetype. What do you then do with your inner critic so that we can get more specificity and more practicality?
Mm-hmm.
The archetypes, and there could have been 100, right? I
Yeah.
distilled them down based on all of my research and what I see from coaching so many women. I distilled them down to 13. So they are things like the perfectionist,
Mm-hmm.
the people pleaser, and all the women listening have just
Everybody
gone,
ticks it.
yes,
Yep.
yes, right?
Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
perfectionist, yes, people pleaser, the good girl,
Uh,
the ideal mother, the empath, the overachiever, the comparer, and
mm-hmm.
there's a number of others, right? So
Yeah.
these are like, if you think about your best friend, your sister, your mum, the women you work with at work, women that you know, and of course ourselves, you can go down that list and go, yes, no, yes, no, yes, yes. Oh, definitely that one. Because we relate to these things.
Mm.
We relate to, oh my gosh, I'm a people pleaser. I didn't know that was like an archetype of behavior or an
Mm-hmm.
inner critic narrative that's running in my head that's making me choose the things that I'm choosing for myself.
Yeah, that's the interesting bit, isn't it? These are archetypes of the inner critic. So therefore, the archetype of the ideal mother, for example, will have a certain narrative, will have a certain inner dialogue, and that certain kind of things that they're constantly evaluating themselves
Yes, yes,
against. And that's going
yes.
to play out differently. And some people will clearly, I assume, have more than one of these
Most
boxes.
most of
They're going to
us,
tick,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Most of us will have multiple
Mm,
archetypes. But what I've found since I published the book, which was, gosh, almost 12 months ago now, I can't believe it, almost 12 months ago, is that women will relate to a couple, but there'll be one that's really loud.
right.
So for me, I'm the overachiever. That's my archetype. And when I was writing it, because I sort of just, it all comes through me when I write, I was writing it and then I was like, oh, okay, well, that's me on a page. That's embarrassing. But that was so clearly me. But there's a couple of others that I really relate to as well, like the empath. And then there may be some archetypes that are old like I used to be a people pleaser. I'm not anymore. Like I worked
Mm-hmm.
my way through that. And the other thing to know is they're not bad. They all of the archetypes has a light side, it has a shadow side. There are positives that make it really
Yeah.
great, and there are shadow sides that are things that, oh, if that's me, like the overachiever absolutely is always on the path to burnout and has to
Mm-hmm.
really watch that and curb that. As an example, that's a shadow side of being an
Mm-hmm.
overachiever. The light side is, gee, we get a lot done and we can really pursue our passion, our purpose in the world. So it's about understanding it, learning how to catch the stories that we're telling ourselves about ourselves, the meaning that we're making from things that are happening to us, and then where our stories and our inner critic narratives are stopping us versus serving us. What do we do about it? And how do we
Yeah.
create better narratives for ourselves?
Yeah, yeah. I really appreciate that you highlight that. That's the thing that I like about the VIA strengths as well. And I know
You love the
you
VIA
studied
strengths.
positive psychology as well. And so when I'm talking to people about the VIA strengths, I always say to them, like, there's no weaknesses on the VIA strengths. Anybody listening,
Yes.
I can put a link in the show notes to the VIA strengths survey. But however, you might need to be wary of overplaying a strength
Yes.
to your
Yes.
own detriment. Like
Yes.
kindness, amazing, love it. Are you so kind that you're a doormat? For me,
Yeah.
optimism can make me make some really reckless decisions. Like it's
Yes.
kind of, how do you overplay humility? I remember, just as a bit of a tangent, but in line with what we're talking about, I was talking to Susie Green, who obviously is a positive
I know
psychologist.
Susie.
Susie, of course you
Yep.
do. I know you do. Susie's been on the podcast as well, actually, but she was a
She's
uni lecturer of
amazing.
mine, and I did some work with her. She's been a fabulous mentor to me. And I said that humility had come out as one of my top strengths. And I know that I was really doing a lot of Buddhist study and meditation at the time. And she said, you want to watch that humility, Cass, because humility can really get in your way when it comes to promoting yourself, putting
Yes.
yourself forward. I was like,
Yes.
oh, so true. So there's
Yes.
having this understanding, I guess, and your archetypes are, what you're saying is a similar message, like understanding the light and the shadow. It's not that they are all bad, because they do serve a useful
Yeah.
purpose sometimes, but it's about that self-awareness and discerning where is it starting to tip in the direction of not serving me.
Absolutely. It's so interesting you raised VIA, because in the Women Rising program, in my confidence module, the radical confidence module, I teach VIA strengths,
Right.
and then I teach inner critic work. So
Right.
that linkage is really important, right? And
Yeah.
it is I love the way that you've just articulated that, and I teach it in the same way.
Yeah.
Are we underplaying our strengths? Are we overplaying our strengths? How do we get to that beautiful sweet spot in the middle where we're just right? We're
Yes.
using them, we're not overusing them. And for inner critic work, it is about self-awareness. And what I find for women, we're so busy doing all of the things and looking after all of the people and not paying any attention to ourselves,
Mm.
that we can just be living on autopilot. And that waking up, and that part of waking up, of understanding, as I write about, these are the forces outside of us that can hold us back. And these are the stories inside of us that
Yes.
can keep us really stuck. When we unlock both of those things, like, that's when we really can step into our power as women and have agency over our lives and make better choices for ourselves.
Megan, you talk about we haven't come as far as we think we have in the last 10 or 20 years. You, with your organisation, did some research, and I was really interested to see that you said 8% of women are thriving at work, meaning 92% are not. What are those systemic barriers that are continuing to women being so dissatisfied? Like, how is this playing out in the workplace?
It's a shocking statistic, isn't it?
Oh.
That's research we did in 2023, that only 8% of women self-declare that they're thriving at work. And I think for so many women, because we're on that treadmill and just doing the things, getting through it, we don't have time or space. And this was my experience as well. Like, I'm on the treadmill, don't look left, don't look right, keep running. Because if you stop, if you pause or slow down that treadmill, the whole world's going to fall apart. And that's the experience for so many women. So that's our individual experience, because we're carrying and holding so much. And then we hit that up against the structural complexities that we live and work within. So for those women who work inside of organizations, the systemic bias that still exists today inside of our workplaces, there's 6 specific types of gender bias that exist. Things, like affinity bias. We want to hire people in our own image. Well, who are most of the hiring managers? They're white, middle-aged men, right? Or, intersectionality bias, the bias that women of color face, or women with a disability face, or queer women face when they have the gender bias as well as another element of bias, and how that rubs up. There's the maternal bias, which is the number one bias that women experience at work, that as soon as a woman has a baby, she is deemed, and an assumption is made that she is less capable than she was before she had a child.
Wow.
And this is all research-based. This is all evidence-based, right? This is what comes through in the data. We do a lot of work with men as male allies. And not only do the men not understand the structural biases that exist, most women don't either. Right? Because
Really?
we're just in the system. We just think that
Right.
this is just the way that it is. And when we start naming it, like we do in our programmatic work with women, and they start to think 74% of women get constantly interrupted in meetings, that's bias in the system. And they have an awakening moment. When they realize that the way that they're being discriminated against when they go off to have a baby or try and come back, or when they're in perimenopause or menopause, or trying to get a promotion when they're 55. That's bias it's not me. I'm not the problem. It's systemic bias in the system. Then we have an awakening moment. But so often, the thing that I hear most often for women, and we've had 10,000 women in 4 years in 68 countries, so that's a big sample size.
Yeah.
The most common thing I hear from women, all ages, all stages, all cultures, all industries, all types of roles, mothers, non-mothers, I thought it was just me.
Right.
We think that we're the problem.
Mm.
And that's one of the biggest shifts that I'm so passionate about making, is saying to women, you are, it's not you. It's not you. It's all of us. And it's the system. It's not a personal failing. It's like burnout is not a personal failing. It's a systemic issue
Mm-hmm.
that's caused by the structures that we live and work in.
Mm-hmm. I have so many questions. This was another really interesting statistic that I read in your work. What did you say? How many women get talked over? 74% of women
74%.
report being talked over. And
Mhm.
then there was having your work stolen.
Yes.
Somebody else taking credit for
Yes,
your
and
work.
that's attribution bias that happens in the workplace.
These
Yeah.
biases are so interesting, aren't they? Because
Yes, and because we see them every single day, again, we think that, oh, well, this is just the way it is. And I have
water
no
that the fish is swimming.
agency.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no agency over this. But in my experience, when women start to realize and look out for and be conscious to the biases that are happening, and when they build the confidence to speak up for themselves or to speak up for other women, and when we build male allies, and the male allies can, oh, Mary just got spoken over for the second time in this meeting. My role as an ally is to say, stop. I'd like to hear what Mary was saying.
Mm-hmm.
Or when Jane's work gets attributed to John and anyone is aware of bias, and then they can go, oh, hang on a minute. Jane said that 5 minutes ago. She
Mm-hmm.
originated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's when we start to see shift. And I am seeing that shift in all of the places that we're working, with the women, with the men, inside organizations. So I am eternally optimistic that we can create the shift and continue to create the shifts that we have seen.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of work to do to be able to do that.
I just wanted to flesh out a bit more, like you say, the self-awareness is when women, the light bulb goes on and they realize, oh, that's not just me. Like I would love for you to just identify a few more of those things that play out in workplaces every day and that we consider to be normal for women to recognize in themselves, because from that point, as you say, then they can start to think about, well, then what do I need to do differently when I realize that this is not just me. You mentioned being promoted over 55. Can we talk about the ageism for a minute, and gendered ageism in particular?
Yes, let's talk about that. So when we did that research in 2023, I thought that the age bias that we were going to see was for older women.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And when I say old, like I'm 55, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
50 and over, we know historically that there's been a lot of age bias that's happened in that group of that demographic. Mm-hmm. And we did see that. We absolutely saw that women over the age of 50, 55, 60 were seeing significant bias in terms of getting the roles or having access to the right opportunities. But what we also see that even shocked me was that women were reporting age bias at every single age demographic.
Really?
From 18 to 65 plus. And the type of age bias is different, as you would expect, in each of those categories, but it was at every age and stage. So, for women who were in those childbearing years and having kids, maternal bias, boom, right there. You are, you've lost half of your brain cells because you've had a baby, and we're going to put you in a box over here, and you're going to get sidelined and you're going to get held back. And that's what we see for women coming back from maternity leave. For younger women, oh, you're too young. The paternalistic bias that we see at work, where it is, oh, sit down, sweetie. Like you're too young, we're not going to listen to you. And like everything in between, right?
Yeah.
And that plays through in a lot of other research studies, not just ours. But yeah, even I was surprised at how prevalent it was at all age groups.
As you're saying that, I'm just thinking that's a classic example of the kind of bias that we internalize as well. I feel like even when I was having a baby, it's very present, almost opting ourselves out because we assume that we're not going to be able to perform as well or at capacity.
Yes.
It's another example of that kind of self-sabotage, isn't it? Because we buy into the bias and we, like I say, we opt ourselves out. I mean, I'm 53 and I find myself having the thought a bit late for that, or I'm a bit old. That even that kind of thinking.
Yeah. And look, it's not our fault, right? And I want women to be really clear. None of this is your fault. It's all programming.
Right.
right? It's all programming. So the woman who's 50, 53, 55, 45, and I hear this a lot in our community, it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
It's just too late. Let me just say very, very clearly, it's never too late. For anyone who's thinking that, it's never too late, right? I just started my PhD last year, 54,
Love it.
right? I started my business at 43.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people who are doing academic study and starting businesses in their 60s and their 70s, in their 80s. Like, it's never too late. So let's just underscore that for everyone.
Yeah.
But none of this is women's fault. None of it.
Mm.
And we say it's self-sabotage, but really it's what we see all around us.
Mm.
I do a free community coaching call most months for our community at Women Rising. And I had someone on the call today. Topic was confidence. And she said, I'm coming back from maternity leave. I have zero confidence. Before I went on maternity leave, I was thriving in my career. That's not her fault. This is the system. This is because she's seen women all around her have this experience when they come back from mat leave, where they get all the things we talked about, sidelined, held back, etc. So, I think that's a really important message for women, because otherwise we just blame ourselves and we think, oh, if I was just fill in the blank,
Yeah.
better, smarter, more capable, more ambitious, more blah, 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 then it would be okay. It's not our fault. And we get to use the tools that will help us make it better for us so that we can make better choices. So we are empowered. We're absolutely empowered. We get to choose that.
So given everything that we understand about the system working against us and the barriers that we are constantly coming up against, the question is, very much as an individual, what do we do about that? So what do women do about that? I mean, there's probably 1,000 examples. You mentioned before, being talked over in a meeting. Assertiveness is something that comes up with the women I work with a lot as well. Again, because we're conditioned to stay quiet and
to be quiet. Yeah.
Right. So, for example, a woman gets talked over in a meeting. Her work gets attributed to somebody else. What can women practically start to do in their workplace to empower themselves, I guess?
Yeah. So just with that specific example, I always coach women to practice your responses. So if you know that you get talked over in meetings, practice saying, I wasn't finished. I'm going to finish what I was saying, as one example. And there's 15 different versions of that, right?
Yeah.
I used to work with a woman she was a GM like I was, older than me, one of the strongest women I've ever known. And in meetings, we were always in meetings with men because we're often the only two women in the room when I was in tech, and she would just keep talking. So people would start talking over her. It was the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my life. She'd just keep talking. And eventually they'd just stop, because they would realize that she's not going to stop talking. So I think it's finding what works for you. That worked for her. She was a very strong woman. She was an older woman. She was very powerful. That wouldn't have worked for me, but for me saying, I'm going to finish what I was saying, or I wasn't finished, or whatever version of that is for you, practice saying it. Practice saying it in low risk situations, so that when you're in a high risk situation where it really matters that you're using your voice, you can say it. And the other thing that I always encourage women to do is find your allies, find your people. Now, they could be other women who are in that meeting with you, and you say, I know I'm going to get interrupted. Can you back me up? Get a number of women to do that. And even more impactful, where are your male allies in that room? Could just be one man. And when you say to him, I need to get my point across today, I know that so-and-so is going to interrupt me. Can you back me up and say, I'd like to hear Megan finish what she was saying? Because when a man says it, this is the system, right? A man or a powerful woman, then we have that support infrastructure around us to back us up, to bolster us, as just one example. But to your broader question, what do women do? In the third part of the Women Rising book, I go through the tools. And the first tool is get really clear on what you want for your life. What is your life vision? Where do you find meaning? Where do you find purpose? How do you build your purpose? We don't find our purpose, we build it with the choices that we make every day. And that's the place that I always want women to start. Because again, that's not what we're thinking about when we're going through our day. We're thinking about everybody else.
Yeah.
And about 95% of women who come into my work have absolutely no idea what their life vision is. So
Really?
when we start, isn't that's a shocking statistic.
Yeah.
And it's very saddening that, as women, I was like this before my burnout. I was a single mom. I was, just doing all the things, right?
Yeah.
So we want to start there. We want to start with clarity about, what do I value? What do I want? Doesn't mean we've got to turn our whole life upside down, but it means we start to shape what our experience is, rather than our life just being shaped by everybody else's expectations of us.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I always, and that's hard, that's not easy work, like the
No.
very first lesson in the Women Rising program, which is 8 modules in 4 months, the first lesson is, let's craft your life vision. And we have women in tears in the first 5 minutes because they're like, I don't know what that is. How do I craft that for myself? But when you unlock that key, everything else, boundaries, confidence, career path, all of those things, well-being, everything starts to get unlocked.
So from there, then you're teaching practical tools, I guess,
Yeah.
for how to navigate these particular situations. It's interesting that you say practice. I think that's a really important point that you make. You can't expect to instantly change a behavior that is been a behavior that you've had
Yes.
your whole life, and that you have adopted, usually, whether you're a people pleaser or a perfectionist or whatever your particular archetype is, we've adopted it as a safety,
Yes.
like a survival strategy, as a safety behavior. So it can feel threatening to do something different.
100%, and unsafe,
Yes.
right? This is a really important point that you've raised. Like, we have to go slowly. We have to be in safe environments, which is why, your community, your work that you do, the Women Rising work that I do, when women come together in support, whether that's one-on-one with a coach, whether that's in a big cohort community, like I run, a million places where women can go and be part of communities or work with coaches or therapists, where we have the safety to get the tools, to practice and work with the tools so that we can rewire our brains, rewire our behaviors so that we can create something better. And it doesn't happen in one crack.
No.
It's like, it's work. Like, this is work, but we
Yeah.
get to choose to show up and do that so that we can be in our power as women.
Yeah.
And it's work that's worth doing, because what's the alternative? It's like creating a life vision. Yeah, that's going to be hard for a lot of people. Some people it'll be super easy. For a lot of people, it's really challenging. What do I want for my life? Oh my God, like, where would I even start? But what's the alternative? We just go through life on autopilot. So it's work that's worth doing for ourselves.
Megan, I'm really curious to hear about what you're studying with your, what is it, spirituality and leadership? Can we?
Yeah.
Can I hear about that? Because I'm personally interested. I know listeners will be too, because that just sounds amazing to me.
Yeah. So I'm doing, the full title of my PhD is PhD in Philosophy and Religion, and my focus is women's spirituality and leadership. Right. So I'm doing it in the US in an amazing institute over there. And it's really about centering women's experience. If you look at spirituality for so long, it centers patriarchy. If you look at religion, what does religion center? Patriarchy, men's voices, men's accounts of history and the world and everything else. So I'm less interested in the religious aspects, but it all flavors women's spirituality and how we really, for me, it's about how we tap into our own feminine wisdom. And how we live from that place. That's the crux of my research. And, this model that I'm building around, like, what are the codes that unlock that? What are the codes that unlock our feminine wisdom for us as women? And how does that help us step into our leadership, into our power, into our full self-agency as women? Yeah, that's my
Amazing.
research. It's amazing. It's amazing. I'm doing it full time, even though I run a business full time. So go work that math.
There's that overachiever.
Yeah, but it's, I sleep 8 hours a night. Don't anybody panic. Like, I have actually very, very healthy balance in my life, just the way I structure everything. But I do a couple of years of coursework. So we're doing, like, I'm about to do Women and World Religions. I've done sacred lineages and looking at mother lines. I'm a student of Vedanta and Tantra and Indian, philosophy and spirituality and yoga and meditation. So I'm doing Tantra this semester. So, I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. Conscious allyship and how we build conscious, inclusive global communities. It's very rich and very diverse and stretches my brain and my spirit in ways that I just never thought possible.
I love it. Can you tell me, did this spiritual interest of yours and the things that you have been drawn to, were they present before? Like when you were, the up and comer and the youngest general manager, whatever, PwC,
Yeah.
were they present then, or did you come to these later when you had the burnout and started to rethink how you were living and operating?
Such a great question. So it's really fascinating because I was very spiritual as a teenager. And when I say spiritual, like new agey, like I had all the new age books and I was into all the stuff, right? That was spiritual, new age. I was a rebel as a teenager. So I didn't want a bar of religion and I didn't want a bar of the system. Like I would rebel against, I tried to get kicked out of school, like I was an actress, just wanted to go to drama school. But I had a very active inner spiritual life when I was a teenager until I hit corporate when I was 25. And once I hit corporate, after about 2 years in the corporate structure, it all got squashed. Like it literally vanished or got deeply suppressed, shall we say. And it didn't come back for a decade until I had my burnout. And the first thing I did after my burnout was I went and did my yoga and meditation teacher training, not because I wanted to teach, but because I wanted to learn really deeply. And that was my reawakening of this really rich inner spiritual life, connection with ancient wisdom and wisdom teachings, and, this whole just reclaiming my spiritual journey. And that was 20 years ago. So, since then, I've done multiple yoga and meditation teacher trainings. I go to India a lot on pilgrimage. Like it's the absolute core foundation of my life.
Yeah, I was interested in that because I similarly have spiritual interest. And for me, when I went back and did my master's in clinical psychology, and it was very science, very evidence-based, and it really felt to me like there was this kind of inner split, like a real struggle to reconcile those two things. And I think many women would relate to that. And I was just reflecting as you were talking then that this is the fucking patriarchy again, isn't it? Like this is the patriarchy that made psychology have to be like science and evidence-based, and you're studying dreams and the unconscious and very spiritual, but they had to take it and make it all masculine and put it in that box.
Yes.
And
strip the feminine out of it.
Right. It's stripped the feminine out of it.
Strip the feminine out of it. And that's why, my research interest and my life interest is all around feminine wisdom, because we've got a lot of masculine wisdom. We've got a lot of masculine spirituality. But where's the feminine? The feminine has been lost over centuries and centuries and centuries of patriarchy. So a lot of my work to date has been about fixing what's out there and helping women deal with what's out there. I mean, that's been my last 20 years of work, right? How do you build confidence and how do you operate in the system and how all of that. And now and I will continue to do that because it's very important work. But this whole next body of my work is our inner lives and our inner wisdom and how we go inward to flourish in our inner realms, not just in the outer realms. And that's what feminine wisdom is for me. And that's why I'm so just enthralled with my PhD. It's why I get up at 3 a.m. to go to class, because it's in the US. It's like, am I crazy? But I love it. Like I can't wait to get into class with the other scholar practitioners. And it's amazing. It feels very purposeful for me.
Yeah, and that's the key, right? Isn't it? It's purposeful. And I am glad that came into the conversation because I think it's not just the reconnecting with the feminine wisdom, it's recognizing that as valid. And it's not less than, and it's not something that should be off to the side. And we diminish that.
Yes.
It's flowery and weakened, and it's not.
Yes.
And I think
no, it's not. It's where our
Right.
power lies as
That
women.
right.
It's where our power lies. Like, make no mistake about it. Your feminine wisdom, your inner knowing, your ability to know your own truth and trust it and to live from that place, that is where your entire power lies as a woman. And we have been told generation upon generation upon generation that that is weakness and that it's softness and that you won't fit in here if that's how you live. So we've hidden it and suppressed it. And it's, when we hear the feminine is rising, this is what we're talking about. But it has to rise within us before it can rise outside, before it can rise in the world, and we can redress this balance of the masculine that's so high and loud and in control, and the feminine that's so suppressed. Before we can right that balance out there, we have to right it within us. And that's my work.
Megan, this has been a really fabulous conversation. Thank you so much for your time. I've loved talking to you.
Thank you. I've loved it too. Thanks for having me.
Crappy to Happy is created and produced by me, Cass Dunn. If you enjoy the show, please hit the follow button wherever you listen to ensure you never miss an episode. Share with a friend to get me into the ears of more lovely listeners, and I would love for you to leave a 5-star rating and review. Thank you so much for being here, and I cannot wait to catch you next week for another fabulous episode of Crappy to Happy.